I never thought a marina expansion would turn into a legal nightmare that would cost the HOA millions. But when Deborah Chambers from Lakeside Estates HOA threatened to fine me into bankruptcy over my dock permits, I decided to remind her exactly whose private road their emergency vehicles had been using for the past 15 years. My name is Jensen, and I own 23 acres of prime waterfront property on Lake Martin in Alabama. The land has been in my family since 1947, long before any of these cookie-cutter HOA communities sprouted up around the lake. My grandfather bought it for practically nothing back then, just a dirt-cheap plot of shoreline that nobody wanted because the road access was terrible. Over the decades, my family built it into something special. We have a main house, a guest cottage, a boathouse, and what had recently become the source of all my problems, a small private marina with 6 boat slips. The trouble started on a humid Tuesday morning in June when I was sitting on my dock, coffee in hand, watching the sun burn off the morning fog. I heard a car door slam up by the main house, followed by the aggressive click of high heels on my gravel driveway. I knew that sound. Deborah had arrived. Deborah Chambers was the president of Lakeside Estates HOA, a planned community of about 200 homes that sat on the eastern shore of the lake. She was 53 years old, with the kind of severe blonde bob haircut that screamed, "I demand to speak with your manager," before she even opened her mouth. She wore pearl earrings with casual clothes and had never met a property dispute she did not want to turn into a federal case. I stood up from my chair and walked up the dock toward the house. By the time I reached the driveway, Deborah was standing next to her white Mercedes SUV, arms crossed, lips pursed into a thin line of disapproval. "Isaac," she said, her voice dripping with forced pleasantness. "We need to talk about your little construction project." I took a sip of my coffee. "Good morning to you too, Deborah. What construction project would that be?" She gestured dramatically toward the lake. "Do not play dumb with me. You have applied for permits to expand your marina from 6 slips to 16 slips. Do you have any idea what that will do to our property values? The traffic, the noise, the pollution?" I set my coffee mug down on the hood of my truck. "First of all, my marina expansion is entirely on my private property. Second, the Army Corps of Engineers has already approved my environmental impact study. Third, and this is the important part, Deborah, your HOA has absolutely zero jurisdiction over my land. None. I am not a member of Lakeside Estates. I never have been and I never will be." Her face flushed red. "Your property borders our community. Your actions directly affect our residents. We have rights." "You have the right to manage your own community," I said calmly. "You do not have the right to tell me what I can or cannot do with land my family has owned for almost 80 years. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a meeting with my contractor in an hour." Deborah's expression turned icy. "You are making a very serious mistake, Isaac. The HOA board met last night and we voted unanimously to oppose your marina expansion. We will fight you on this. We will file injunctions, appeals, lawsuits, whatever it takes." I picked up my coffee mug. "You are welcome to waste your members' dues on lawyers if that is how you want to spend your time. But the permits are legal, the expansion is happening, and there is not a damn thing you can do about it." She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking back toward the house. I heard her car door slam a moment later, followed by the aggressive spray of gravel as she peeled out of my driveway. That should have been the end of it. I had the permits, I had the approvals, and I had the law on my side. But I had underestimated Deborah's vindictiveness and the HOA's willingness to burn money on legal fees. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from Lakeside Estates HOA. Inside was a notice of violation and a demand for $25,000 in fines for unauthorized commercial development affecting community aesthetics and property values. The letter cited a bunch of made-up violations including excessive noise, light pollution, and environmental damage. It threatened legal action if I did not cease construction immediately and pay the fines within 30 days. I called my attorney, Marcus Webb, a sharp guy in his 40s who specialized in property law. We met at his office in Alexander City that same afternoon. Marcus read through the letter, shaking his head. "This is completely baseless. They have no authority to fine you. You are not a member of their HOA. "I know that," I said. "But what do I do about it?" He leaned back in his chair. "You ignore it. Let them file their lawsuit if they want. We will get it dismissed, probably get them sanctioned for filing a frivolous claim, and that will be the end of it." But it was not the end of it. Deborah and the HOA board filed not just one lawsuit, but 3. They sued me in state court for nuisance. They filed a complaint with the Army Corps of Engineers claiming my environmental study was fraudulent. They even tried to get the county to revoke my building permits by claiming I had bribed the inspector. Every single claim was bullshit, but defending against them cost time and money. My contractor had to stop work while the county investigated the bribery allegation, which was dismissed after about 3 weeks. But the delay cost me thousands in demobilization and remobilization costs. The Army Corps investigation took 2 months and found absolutely nothing wrong with my permits, but my marina opening got pushed back an entire season. Marcus was excellent, and we successfully defeated every legal challenge, but I was furious. The HOA had essentially weaponized the legal system to harass me, knowing that even frivolous lawsuits cost money and time to defend against. Then in late September, Deborah made her biggest mistake. I was meeting with my contractor, discussing the final phase of the marina construction, when I saw Deborah's Mercedes coming up my driveway again. This time she was not alone. She had brought 2 other HOA board members with her, Patricia Morrison, the treasurer, and Susan Kelly, the secretary. The 3 of them approached me like a delegation, Deborah in the lead, the other 2 flanking her like backup singers. "Isaac, we need to discuss a compromise," Deborah said, her tone suggesting this was going to be anything but a compromise. I crossed my arms. "I am listening." Deborah pulled out a folder. "The HOA board is prepared to drop all legal action against you and your marina expansion, provided you agree to our terms." "What terms?" She handed me a document. "First, you will limit your marina to 10 slips instead of 16. Second, you will impose quiet hours from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., with no boat engines running during those times. Third, you will contribute $50,000 to the Lakeside Estates Community Beautification Fund as compensation for the impact on our property values. And fourth, you will grant the HOA an easement to access your shoreline for community events." I did not even look at the document. "Absolutely not." Patricia, a pinched-faced woman in her 60s, stepped forward. "Mr. Jensen, we are trying to be reasonable here." "Reasonable?" I laughed. "You have spent the last 3 months suing me with frivolous lawsuits, costing me over $60,000 in legal fees and construction delays, and now you want me to pay you $50,000 and give up part of my property. That is not reasonable. That is extortion." Susan, younger than the other 2 but equally self-righteous, chimed in. "If you do not agree to these terms, we will continue our legal action. We will make your life miserable." I stepped closer to them. "Let me be very clear. I am not giving you a single penny. I am not reducing my marina slips. I am not giving you an easement. And if you continue your frivolous lawsuits, I will countersue the HOA and each of you personally for malicious prosecution, abusive process, and harassment. My attorney assures me we have an excellent case. Deborah's face turned red. You arrogant son of a bitch. You think you can just do whatever you want because your family has been here forever. Times have changed. Lakeside Estates has 400 residents. We have political connections. We have money. You are just one man on a piece of property that is way too big for you to manage alone. That was when something clicked in my brain, something I had not thought about in years. Speaking of managing my property, I said slowly, I just remembered something. The access road that runs from Highway 63 to your community entrance, the one all your residents used to get to their houses. That road cuts across the northeast corner of my property, about 300 feet of it. Deborah blinked. What are you talking about? When they built Lakeside Estates back in 1995, the developer needed access from the highway to the community. But the only viable route crossed my family's land. My Uncle Joseph was alive then, and he was a kind man. The developer asked if they could build a road across our property, and Uncle Joseph said yes. He gave them a verbal easement, very informal, very friendly. But here is the thing about easements, Deborah. Verbal easements in Alabama are not permanent. They can be revoked by the landowner at any time, especially if the easement is being used in a way that harms the landowner. Patricia's face went pale. You would not. I am not saying I will, I said. I am just saying I could. And that access road is not just for your residents. It is also the primary route the fire department uses to reach your community. If there was ever a fire in Lakeside Estates, those fire trucks would have to use my road to get there quickly. The alternative route from the other side of the lake adds about 15 minutes to the response time. That is a long time when a house is burning. Deborah's voice shook with rage. If you block that road, you will be liable for any damages. Actually, no, I said. As the property owner, I have the right to control who accesses my land. And if the HOA continues to harass me with frivolous lawsuits, I think that qualifies as a pretty good reason to revoke my permission. I handed the document back to Deborah without looking at it. Get off my property. And tell your lawyers I will see them in court. The three women left, and I thought that would be the end of it. A warning shot, nothing more. I honestly did not think I would ever actually revoke the road easement. It seemed too extreme, too dangerous, but Deborah was not finished. 3 days later, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that the Lakeside Estates HOA had filed a claim with the county seeking to have the verbal easement across my property declared a permanent, irrevocable easement by prescriptive use. Essentially, they were arguing that because they had used the road for 30 years, they now had a legal right to it regardless of my permission. And then they escalated even further. The letter also informed me that the HOA had filed a formal complaint with the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, claiming my marina was dumping sewage into the lake. This was an outrageous lie. My marina had a state-of-the-art sewage pump-out station that was inspected and certified every year. But the ADEM investigation would take months, and during that time, I would have to allow inspectors onto my property, provide documentation, and potentially face criminal charges if they decided to believe the HOA's lies. I called Marcus immediately. They are trying to bury you in paperwork, he said after I explained the situation. The prescriptive easement claim is weak, but it will take time and money to fight. The ADEM complaint is pure harassment. They know it is false, but they also know it will cost you. What can I do? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly, you could give them something small just to make them go away. Reduce your Marina to 14 slips instead of 16, maybe contribute 10,000 to their beautification fund. Call it a peace offering. No, I said firmly. I am not rewarding this behavior. They need to learn they cannot bully people into submission. Then you need to hit back, Marcus said, and hit back hard. You mentioned the road easement. Are you serious about that? I thought about it. What would happen if I revoked it? Legally, you are allowed to, Marcus said. Verbal easements can be revoked in Alabama, especially if you can demonstrate that the easement holder is acting in bad faith or causing you harm. Given the HOA's pattern of harassment, you have a solid case. But Isaac, if you do this, people are going to get hurt. Not physically maybe, but their property values will drop. Their insurance rates will go up when they find out fire response times are slower, and they are going to be furious with you. They should be furious with Deborah, I said. She is the one who started this war. I spent a week thinking about it. I did not want to be the bad guy. I did not want to put people's homes at risk. But the HOA had made it clear they would not stop until they destroyed me financially or forced me off my own land. On October 15th, I had Marcus draft a formal notice of easement revocation. The letter informed Lakeside Estates HOA that as of November 1st, they no longer had permission to use the access road crossing my property. The letter cited the ongoing harassment, the frivolous lawsuits, and the false idem complaint as reasons for the revocation. Marcus filed the notice with the county clerk and sent copies to the HOA, the county sheriff's department, and the local fire department. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours of receiving the notice, Deborah called me 17 times. I did not answer. She then showed up at my property with a local news crew, claiming I was putting lives at risk over a petty dispute. The news crew wanted my side of the story, so I gave it to them. I explained the HOA's harassment, the frivolous lawsuits, the false environmental complaints, and the fact that they had tried to extort $50,000 from me. I showed them the legal documents proving everything I said. The story aired that evening, and public opinion was split. Some people thought I was a hero standing up to an abusive HOA. Others thought I was a monster willing to let people's houses burn out of spite. The HOA filed an emergency injunction to stop me from blocking the road. The hearing was scheduled for October 25th. Marcus and I showed up at the Tallapoosa County Courthouse with boxes of evidence. Copies of the HOA's lawsuits, the false idem complaint, the extortion letter, and documentation of the $60,000 I had spent defending against their frivolous claims. The HOA's attorney, a slick guy named Richard Pemberton, argued that the easement had been in place for 30 years and that revoking it would endanger public safety. Marcus countered by walking the judge through the timeline of harassment. Your Honor, this is not about property rights. This is about an HOA that has weaponized the legal system to bully a private landowner. Mr. Jensen has been subjected to over a dozen frivolous legal actions in the past 4 months, costing him tens of thousands of dollars. The HOA has filed false environmental complaints, attempted extortion, and is now claiming a right to his property that they never legally secured. Mr. Jensen has every right to revoke a verbal easement, especially when the easement holder is acting in such egregious bad faith. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Helen Crawford, reviewed the evidence carefully. After about 30 minutes, she looked up. I am denying the HOA's request for an injunction, she said. Mr. Jensen is within his legal rights to revoke the easement. However, I am going to issue a strong recommendation that both parties sit down and negotiate a resolution to this dispute. Mr. Jensen, I understand your frustration, but blocking emergency vehicle access is a serious matter. And to the HOA, your behavior toward Mr. Jensen has been appalling. If I see another frivolous lawsuit from your organization, I will personally recommend sanctions." Deborah looked like she was about to explode, but Pemberton put a hand on her arm to keep her quiet. As we left the courthouse, Marcus turned to me. "You won, but the judge is right. You need to think about the consequences here." "I have," I said, "and I am going through with it." On November 1st, I installed a locked gate across the access road where it entered my property. I posted signs indicating it was private property and that trespassers would be prosecuted. The HOA residents were furious. I received hundreds of angry emails and phone calls. Someone spray-painted "murderer" on my mailbox. A group of residents organized a protest outside my property, chanting and holding signs that said "safety over spite" and "open the road." But I also received support. Several local property rights groups praised me for standing up to HOA overreach. I did interviews with local and even some national news outlets, explaining my side of the story. The real test came on November 8th, 1 week after I closed the road. I was in my workshop around 9 at night when I heard sirens in the distance. I walked outside and saw a red glow in the sky to the east, toward Lakeside Estates. Something was on fire. My stomach dropped. This was exactly what everyone had warned me about. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus. "There is a fire in the HOA community. What do I do?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "You are under no legal obligation to open the gate. The fire department knows about the situation. They will use the alternate route." I stood in my driveway, watching the glow in the sky, feeling sick. I had made my point, but at what cost? The next morning, I learned that a house on the north side of Lakeside Estates had caught fire due to an electrical issue. The fire department had indeed used the alternate route, adding 14 minutes to their response time. By the time they arrived, the house was fully engulfed. No one was hurt, thank God. The family had gotten out safely, but the house was a total loss. The local news had a field day. Deborah gave a tearful interview, claiming that I had blood on my hands, and that the house could have been saved if the fire trucks had been able to use the normal route. I felt terrible, but I also knew that the fire chief had said the house was already fully involved when the call came in. The extra 14 minutes had not made a difference in terms of saving the structure, though it certainly did not help. Still, the public backlash was intense. I received death threats. Someone threw a brick through my window. The county commission held an emergency meeting to discuss whether they could use eminent domain to take my property and create a public easement. That was when things took an unexpected turn. On November 12th, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, given all the harassment calls I had been getting, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Jensen, this is Fire Chief Thomas Garrett from the Tallapoosa County Fire Department. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course, Chief. I have been following your situation with the HOA, and I want you to know that we do not blame you for what happened. We understand the difficult position you are in, but I am calling because I think there might be a solution that works for everyone." I listened as Chief Garrett explained his idea. The fire department wanted to negotiate a formal emergency access easement across my property. This would be a legal, recorded easement that would allow emergency vehicles only to use the road. Regular HOA traffic would still be blocked, forcing residents to use the longer alternate route. But fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars would have access. "In exchange," Chief Garrett said, "the county would agree to maintain that section of the road at no cost to you, and we would install a gate that only emergency vehicles can open with a special key." The HOA residents would not be able to use it. What would I get out of this? I asked. Besides knowing you are doing the right thing for public safety, the county attorney has agreed to join your countersuit against the HOA for malicious prosecution. We have been watching their behavior, and frankly, we are tired of dealing with their nonsense too. They file false reports, waste our time, and abuse the legal system. If the county joins your suit, it carries a lot more weight. We can also pursue criminal charges against HOA board members for filing false environmental reports if the ADEM investigation shows they knowingly lied. I thought about it. I need to talk to my attorney, of course. But Mr. Jensen, I think this is your best path forward. You get to keep the HOA off your land. You get justice for what they have done to you. And you do not have to live with the guilt of someone getting hurt because emergency services could not get through fast enough. I called Marcus and explained Chief Garrett's offer. Marcus thought it was brilliant. This is exactly what you need, he said. You maintain control of your property, the HOA residents still face consequences for their actions, and you get the county on your side in the lawsuit. Plus, if the county pursues criminal charges against the HOA board members, that sends a very strong message. I agreed to Chief Garrett's proposal. On November 18th, I signed a formal emergency access easement with Tallapoosa County. The easement was specific and narrow. Only marked emergency vehicles could use the road, and only when responding to calls. The gate was installed with a Knox box system that fire departments across the country use. Regular HOA residents still had to use the alternate route, adding about 12 minutes to their commute. Their property values did take a hit, and several residents put their houses up for sale. Deborah and the HOA board were livid. They filed another lawsuit, this time claiming that I had created a public nuisance by forcing residents to use the longer route. That lawsuit was dismissed within weeks, and the judge sanctioned the HOA's attorney for filing yet another frivolous claim. Then in December, the ADEM investigation concluded. The report was scathing. It found absolutely no evidence of environmental violations at my marina, and furthermore, it concluded that the HOA's complaint had been made in bad faith with no factual basis. Based on that finding, the county attorney filed criminal charges against Deborah Chambers, Patricia Morrison, and Susan Kelly for making false statements to a government agency. In Alabama, that is a misdemeanor punishable by up to a year in jail and a fine of up to $6,000. The three women were arrested in early January. The mugshots made the local news, and suddenly public opinion shifted dramatically. People who had called me a monster were now calling the HOA board members criminals. Residents of Lakeside Estates were furious that their board members' vendetta against me had resulted in criminal charges and national embarrassment for their community. The HOA held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Deborah, Patricia, and Susan from the board. The new board president, a reasonable guy named Tom Hendricks, reached out to me through Marcus. Mr. Jensen, on behalf of the Lakeside Estates community, I want to apologize for everything that has happened. The previous board's actions were inexcusable. We would like to discuss a resolution that works for both parties. Marcus, Tom, and I met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Alexander City. Tom was in his early 50s, a retired engineer who had only been on the HOA board for a year and had opposed most of Deborah's actions. "Here is what we are proposing," Tom said. "The HOA will formally drop all legal actions against you and your marina. We will issue a public apology. We will reimburse you for your legal fees and construction delays, and we will agree never to interfere with your property rights again." In exchange, we are asking if you would be willing to allow residents to use the access road again, under certain conditions. What conditions? I asked. We would like to negotiate a formal recorded easement with you. You would retain ownership of the land, but we would pay for the easement rights. We would also agree to maintain the road, cover all insurance liability, and restrict traffic hours so it is not a nuisance to you. If there are any violations of the agreement, the easement would automatically terminate. I looked at Marcus. He nodded slightly. It was a good offer. How much are we talking for the easement? I asked. Tom pulled out a document. Our attorney has appraised the value at $150,000, payable to you immediately, plus an annual maintenance fee of $5,000. Additionally, we will pay your legal fees, which I understand are around $70,000, and $50,000 for your construction delays and emotional distress. Total of $270,000 upfront, plus $5,000 per year. I did not answer right away. I wanted them to sweat a little. I will also need the HOA to agree to several conditions, I said. First, the easement agreement includes a moratorium clause. If the HOA or its members file any legal action against me in the future, the easement terminates immediately with no refund. Second, I want a public apology not just from the current board, but from Deborah, Patricia, and Susan personally. Third, I want the HOA to pay for repairs to my mailbox and window that were vandalized. And fourth, I want a written guarantee that the HOA will never oppose any future development on my property. Tom did not hesitate. Done. We will have our attorney draft the agreement. The agreement was finalized in February. I received a cashier's check for $270,000. Deborah, Patricia, and Susan each sent written apologies, though I could tell Deborah's was written through gritted teeth. The three women pleaded guilty to the false statement charges and were each sentenced to 6 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and fined $3,000. They were also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Alabama. My countersuit for malicious prosecution went to trial in April. With the county attorney backing me up, the case was open and shut. The jury awarded me an additional $150,000 in damages, plus attorney fees. The judge also issued a permanent injunction preventing Lakeside Estates HOA from filing any legal actions against me without first obtaining court permission. By the time everything was settled, I had recovered all my costs plus a substantial amount extra. More importantly, I had sent a message that you cannot bully people just because you have an HOA board position. I finished my Marina expansion in May, right at the start of the boating season. All 16 slips were rented out within a week. The Marina has been profitable and drama-free ever since. The access road is now governed by a formal easement agreement. HOA residents use it every day, and there have been no issues. Tom Hendricks and I actually became friendly. He invites me to the HOA community events occasionally, though I usually decline. I am not much for organized social activities. Deborah Chambers moved away from Lake Martin about 6 months after the court cases ended. I heard she sold her house at a loss and moved to Florida. Patricia and Susan still live in the community, but they keep their heads down. I see them occasionally at the grocery store in town, and they avoid eye contact. The whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, never underestimate the pettiness of an HOA board president with too much time on her hands. Second, documentation is everything. If I had not kept meticulous records of every legal action the HOA took against me, the countersuit would have been much harder to win. And third, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, even if it means making yourself temporarily unpopular. The story got picked up by several property rights organizations and HOA reform groups. I have been contacted by dozens of people around the country who are dealing with similar situations. Abusive HOAs using legal harassment to control people who are not even members of their communities. I try to offer advice when I can, mostly just telling people to document everything and get a good attorney. My marina is thriving. I have added a small ship store that sells bait, ice, and basic boating supplies. I hired a local teenager to work there on weekends. The kid is saving up for college and I like helping out. I still own all 23 acres and I have no plans to sell or develop further. This land is my family's legacy, and after everything that happened, I am even more determined to protect it. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I sit on my dock with my coffee and watch the sun come up over Lake Martin. I see boats coming and going from my marina, hear the sound of water lapping against the hulls, and I feel content. This is my land, earned and protected, and nobody is going to take it from me. Deborah Chambers tried to bully me into submission using the power of her HOA position. She thought that because she had a board title and a community full of residents behind her, she could push around a single property owner. She was wrong. The whole saga lasted about 9 months from start to finish, but the impact will last much longer. The Lakeside Estates HOA completely overhauled their bylaws after the lawsuit, implementing checks and balances to prevent any future board from abusing their power the way Deborah's board did. They now require a vote of the entire membership before filing any lawsuit. They established term limits for board positions, and they created an ombudsman position to handle disputes with neighboring properties. Tom Hendricks told me that the legal fees and settlement payments nearly bankrupted the HOA. They had to levy a special assessment of $3,000 per household to cover the costs. A lot of residents were furious, and it led to several more board members resigning in disgrace. The county also made changes. They now require all verbal easements to be formally recorded, and they have established clearer guidelines for when HOAs can and cannot take legal action against non-members. Chief Garrett and I developed a good relationship through all of this. The fire department held a public education event about emergency access and property rights, and they invited me to speak. I explained my situation and emphasized that I had never wanted to put anyone's safety at risk, but I also would not be bullied off my own land. The speech was well received. Several firefighters came up to me afterward and thanked me for standing up to the HOA, saying they had dealt with Deborah's nonsense for years and were glad someone finally called her out. My attorney Marcus became a good friend too. We still meet for lunch occasionally, and he loves telling the story of the HOA president who thought she could steal a road easement through sheer force of will. He uses it as a cautionary tale when speaking at legal conferences about HOA overreach. The marina itself exceeded all my expectations. In the first year, I generated over $80,000 in revenue from slip rentals alone. The ship store added another $20,000. After expenses, I netted about $60,000, which is not bad for what is essentially a side business. I also started renting out my guest cottage as a vacation rental. It is a beautiful 2-bedroom place right on the water, and it books solid during the summer months. That brings in another $30,000 a year. Between the marina, the cottage rental, and my main job doing consulting work for environmental engineering firms, I am doing better financially than I ever have. The irony is not lost on me that Deborah's attempt to destroy me financially ended up making me significantly wealthier. I used some of the settlement money to make improvements to my property. I renovated the boathouse, upgraded the dock lighting, and installed a state-of-the-art security system. After the vandalism during the dispute, I was not taking any chances. The security cameras proved useful a few months after everything settled. I caught someone trying to sneak onto my property late at night. The footage was clear enough that I could identify the person. It was Patricia Morrison's husband, Frank, apparently still bitter about the whole situation. He was trying to damage one of my boats. I called the sheriff, and Frank was arrested for trespassing and attempted vandalism. He pleaded guilty and got probation. Patricia was mortified. She actually came to my property a week later and apologized in person, saying her husband had acted without her knowledge and that she was deeply sorry. I appreciated the apology, though I made it clear that any further incidents would result in immediate legal action. Life slowly returned to normal. The news crews stopped calling. The protesters went home. The angry emails tapered off. I went back to my routine of working during the week, maintaining the marina on weekends and enjoying my property in peace. Every so often, I would drive past the entrance to Lakeside Estates and see the community sign, freshly painted and well-maintained. The place looked nice, I had to admit. The homes were well kept, the landscaping was professional, and the residents seemed happy. But I also knew what lay beneath that pleasant exterior. The politics, the power struggles, the petty disputes over fence heights and mailbox colors. That is the thing about HOAs. They can provide structure and maintain property values, but they also attract people who crave control and authority over their neighbors. I thought about all the people around the country living under HOA rules, having to ask permission to paint their front door or plant a tree in their own yard. I thought about the board members who abused their power, issuing fines for minor violations and making their neighbors' lives miserable. And I felt grateful that my family had bought this land decades before HOAs were even a concept, that I was grandfathered in, protected by property rights that predated the entire community next door. The marina expansion that started this whole mess turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made, not just financially but personally. It taught me that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is difficult, even when people call you a villain, even when the local news paints you as selfish and dangerous. Because at the end of the day, Deborah and her board were the ones who acted improperly. They filed false complaints, wasted their members' money on frivolous lawsuits, and tried to bully me into giving up my property rights. And they faced real consequences for it. Criminal charges, financial penalties, and permanent professional disgrace. That is how the system is supposed to work. I still get calls occasionally from people dealing with HOA disputes. Just last month, a guy from Tennessee called me. His HOA was trying to force him to tear down a shed he had built on his property, claiming it violated architectural guidelines, even though he had gotten approval before building it. I gave him the same advice I give everyone. Document everything, get a lawyer who specializes in property law, and do not back down if you are in the right. HOAs count on people being too intimidated or too broke to fight back. But if you stand your ground and you have the law on your side, you can win. The guy called me back 2 months later to say he had won his case. The HOA had to reimburse him for his legal fees and issue a formal apology. He thanked me for the encouragement and said he never would have fought back if I had not shared my story. That made me feel good. Like maybe all the stress and aggravation I went through had a purpose beyond just protecting my own property. My marina is approaching its 3rd summer season now, and I am considering expanding the ship store to include a small cafe. Nothing fancy, just coffee, sandwiches, and snacks for boaters. The county already approved my initial plans, and I am working with a contractor to finalize the design. I learned my lesson from the first expansion, though. This time, I sent formal notification letters to all surrounding property owners, including the Lakeside Estates HOA, explaining my plans and inviting them to a public comment session. I wanted to be completely transparent and give everyone a chance to voice concerns before I started construction. Tom Hendricks from the HOA sent me a letter saying the board had reviewed my plans and had no objections. In fact, he said several HOA residents were excited about having a cafe nearby where they could grab breakfast before heading out on the lake. The public comment session was well attended and positive. A few people asked questions about noise and traffic, which I addressed with detailed plans for soundproofing and parking management. Nobody objected. It is amazing how much smoother things go when you deal with reasonable people instead of petty tyrants. Construction on the cafe started in March, and if everything goes according to schedule, we will open in June right at the peak of boating season. I have already hired a manager, a woman named Beth Norton who has years of experience running restaurants. She is excited about the project and has great ideas for the menu. My life now is better than it has ever been. I have a thriving business, a beautiful property, and the satisfaction of knowing I stood up for my rights and won. Sometimes I wonder what Deborah is doing in Florida. Is she on another HOA board somewhere, terrorizing a new set of neighbors? Or did she learn her lesson? I hope it is the latter, but I suspect it is the former. People like Deborah rarely change. They just find new targets, but that is not my problem anymore. I have my land, my marina, my peace and quiet. And I have the legal precedent to protect it all. If any future HOA board gets ideas about trying to push me around, they can look up the court records from 2025 and 2026 and see exactly how that worked out for Deborah Chambers and her colleagues. That is the legacy of this whole mess. Not just my personal victory, but a warning to every petty tyrant with an HOA title that property rights matter, and the courts will enforce them. I installed a small plaque near the entrance to my marina. It is not flashy or pretentious, just a simple brass plate with an inscription. Jensen Family Marina. Established 2025. This land has been in our family since 1947 and will remain so for generations to come. Every time I see that plaque, I think about my grandfather who bought this land for almost nothing. My Uncle Joseph, who was kind enough to let the HOA use his road, and my father who taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what is yours. They would be proud of how this turned out. The access road is still there, governed by the formal easement agreement. HOA residents use it every day without issue. Emergency vehicles have the access they need, and I get paid $5,000 a year for the privilege while maintaining complete control over my property. It is a good arrangement, and it only happened because I was willing to stand my ground when Deborah Chambers tried to bully me. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, dealing with an abusive HOA or any other organization trying to push you around, remember this. Document everything, hire a good lawyer, and do not back down if you are in the right. The legal system works slowly and imperfectly, but it works. And justice, when it finally arrives, is sweet. I am sitting on my dock now, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink. A family of ducks paddles by, and I can hear the distant sound of a boat engine from somewhere across the water. This is my land, my legacy, my peace. And nobody will ever take it from me again.